Hi, everybody. My name is Kirsten Berdahl. I'm a physical therapist and I manage the new Gateway Safe Patient Handling Education Program. This video is an introduction to safe patient handling and mobility, and I'm ready to get started. Okay, well, turns out in healthcare we have a problem. We have a little bit of a secret, and that is that we have really dangerous jobs. Everybody thinks this is a dangerous job, but healthcare is really a dangerous job. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics did a study in 2014, and they looked at overexertion injuries. So these are not slips and falls. These are not, a hammer gun through the toe or whatever. These are doing too much, overexertion injuries. And across the whole United States and all injuries, the rate was about 33 per 10,000 workers. Unless you worked in a hospital, it's twice that. And in a nursing home, it's 3 times that. And for ambulance workers, it's 5 times that. Another study done a little earlier showed that the most frequent non-fatal occupational injuries and illnesses were in healthcare. Not only the most frequent, but when they looked at the ones that required light duty or days away from work, again, healthcare was at the top. This is just another study that shows the same thing. When it looked at the number of days someone had to miss, nurses' aides, orderlies, attendants were ranked second behind laborers, freight, and stock and material movers. So in other words, nurses' aides or healthcare workers, nurses and nurses' aides and healthcare workers were getting injured almost as severely as people that move stuff for a living. Why is this happening? Well, another study a long time ago showed that in an 8-hour shift, and really, which nurse works 8 hours anymore? But in an 8-hour shift, a nurse can lift 1.8 tons. So no wonder people are getting injured. Looking more at the cause again, NIOSH has decided or has determined that the single greatest risk factor for these overexertion injuries are what we lift. It's that we are lifting and moving patients. No other injury moves people like we have to. And that's the reason that we're getting injured. Another quick statistic, and mostly just want to show you workman's comp. Just for healthcare industry can reach up to $1 billion per year. A little bit more from OSHA. Anybody that does any kind of task that is repetitive in awkward postures with a great deal of force, so moving something heavy or any kind of combination of this is at an extra risk. And of course, that describes most of our activities when we're working with patients. I have another list here of the top 10 risky behaviors that were tracked in a rehab unit. And these are things that we do all day long, as you guys can see. There's even one more too, and that's transferring a patient from a bed to a stretcher or those lateral transfers. So what's the solution? Well, safe patient handling. In 1994, NIOSH did a really good study where they measured forces in someone's spine, and they determined that when we are moving patients, not boxes, not inanimate objects, when we move patients, the maximum amount of weight that we should be lifting is, ready for this, 35 pounds. So something has to change. And that change is safe patient handling. Just to let you know that I'm not making this stuff up, this is the safe patient handling page for the American Nurses Association. This is a whole booklet on it for peri-op nursing. This is OSHA. Veterans Administration, they are the industry leaders in safe patient handling. This is their information. And if you look closely here, they've been able to reduce their injuries to healthcare providers over 40%. This story has become important enough that it even made a radio story series back in 2015. Again, this isn't my opinion. This is what's going on out there in healthcare. So what I want to introduce you to is what I'm talking about. What kinds of equipment am I talking about? Well, they can be divided into different categories, and I'll run through them. You can see them here. So we'll start with the really basic and then go up to more sophisticated. Part of the basic equipment is just what we call friction reducing devices. They're just pieces of plastic or canvas that are folded on themselves so that there's two layers. They can be in tubes or they can be two layers folded on themselves. But you put those underneath the patient and they become slippery, slick as ice. Some you put directly under the patient, some you use the draw sheet, but something very simple, inexpensive, and it helps tremendously with those bed mobility activities. Some other kinds of devices are ones that help us with those dangerous lateral transfers. So there can be using air, like this air-assisted device that you see right here, or sometimes are used on rollers, and they make it super easy to slide a patient over to a stretcher. So cool, and hopefully you'll get to play with some of these when you come to lab. There are sit-to-stand frames, so there are devices that help the patient stand up. Some are powered and some are manual. And what's cool is once the patient's up, then all of these devices are on wheels. So then you can take them to a different location. You can take them to the bathroom if you need to, put them in a chair, or just have them stand for exercise and all those good things that gravity provides. You can use devices that we call floor-based lifts. So you attach different slings and sheets to this bar, and then you can lift the patient up, and then the whole thing rolls. Here, they're using one of those floor-based lifts, or you can even have these motors attached to the ceiling and attach a sheet like is here or a sling and move the patient in bed. We can move them up in bed, we can roll them over, move them side to side, or move them onto a stretcher. We actually got one of these overhead ceiling lifts about a year and a half ago in our little safe patient handling lab at Gateway. Very exciting day. And there it is at the end of the red arrow there. And there's the frame. Normally that would be attached to the ceiling, but instead of installing new ceiling structure, we used the frame instead. And here's me when we got it. I was so excited. I couldn't stand it. The coolest device ever. Here's some more activities that you can do with those overhead bars. Move a patient with a sling, and you guys may recognize the sling looks a lot like a Hoyer sling, and it works the same way. You can also walk patients with these overhead lifts. And the lift is not meant to, I wish we didn't call it lift, because it's not really meant to pick up the patient. It's just meant to be there in case they stumble or fall. This is the point in the presentation where I usually ask you guys, how do you think the patient feels in these devices? So I'll have to tell you that my point is, I think they feel safer. And what does that mean? That means they'll walk a little further. They'll exercise a little more. They'll do a few more squats with physical therapy. And that's only going to get them out of the hospital better. And what do you think about me as the therapist there? What do I think about this device? Well, I would much rather use my hands to help a patient move, maybe stabilize their knee, help them shift weight, help them advance their walker, rather than putting a gait belt on their waist, grabbing on for dear life, and just praying that they don't fall down. So I feel safer and the patient feels safer, and both of us feel more comfortable pushing the patient just a little bit. Also, too, with one of these harnesses, it might take only one person to walk a patient, where if I don't have one of those harnesses, it might take 2 or 3 of us. So really a win-win situation. These days, the equipment is getting a little more ubiquitous and a little more affordable. And here's a picture of someone who has a track in a long-term care setting, but people are also getting them in their homes. What a great thing. If you have someone who really is immobile at home and needs a lot of help, to have one of these in the home has got to be such a wonderful way to decrease the physical burden of caregiving for someone that you love that's at home. Just a couple other slides. These are some fancy beds now that are coming out. Here the patient can exercise and wait there a little bit while they're still in bed. And this one actually turns into a chair and the patient can walk right out. So some pretty cool stuff out there. Look at this crazy thing. Does just about everything. I should say right here, I have no interest in any particular brand of equipment. I show you guys different brands. There's going to be a lot of different brands in our big lab, but I don't get paid to endorse or talk about any of them. What are the activities that we can do with this equipment? Virtually anything that we need to do that involves moving a patient. And if you want to take just a minute, if you click on, I think this is the hyperlink, it will take you to a YouTube video. The video is literally 1 minute long. It shows a Golvo, which is a particular brand of equipment, a particular device. The reason I show this video is because in 1 minute, it shows this device doing about, 6 or 7 different tasks. So that's the point that I want to get across, is that one device can do many, many different things. It just depends on what you attach to it and how you use it. I want to talk for just a second about the BMAT. BMAT stands for Bedside Mobility Assessment Tool. It was actually developed at Banner, just right down the street here. I think the one in Mesa, and it's now been proven to be valid and reliable. So what it is a very quick assessment that is geared for nursing to perform, but really anybody could. Very, very quick assessment. And depending on how the patient does in the assessment, it guides the caregiver to decide what types of equipment the patient might need. So once the assessment is completed, and you can see just very simple activities. Here's the rest of it. So once the assessment is completed, the patient ends up with a number. There are mobility level 1, mobility level 2, 3, or 4. Once they have a number, then it helps you or helps the caregiver decide what types of devices. So that's what this is here. This is kind of a list of devices. Or some hospitals have more of a pictorial thing. So if somebody tests at level 1, these are the kinds of things you would most likely use with them, 2, 3, and 4, and so on. So there are some tools out there that help us caregivers determine which devices should be used. And it also gives us a common language so that physical therapy could talk to nursing or occupational therapy, or maybe even someone in diagnostic imaging and say, you know what, this patient that's coming to see you, they're mobility level 3. So why don't you go ahead and use the Serostedi? Something like that. So it's a really helpful little tool. Our vision at Gateway is that we want safe patient handling to be eventually integrated with all of our programs and all of our levels. Myself and Victoria Voigt are working hard to make that happen. We're also planning on putting some continuing education courses together and even some courses for the community for those family caregivers. So we're very excited about that, and I hope someday some of you may help us teach those. Back to a little bit more about safe patient handling. There has been laws introduced in different states and at the federal level. To date, the federal law has not passed, But it's interesting. It's called the Healthcare Worker Protection Act. It's not called Safe Patient Handling. It's called Healthcare Worker Protection. And hopefully it'll be reintroduced someday. And maybe we'll talk about some more COVID-related things too in a bill like that. There are several states that have laws. Arizona is not one of them. But if you work in some of these other states, your institutions are mandated to have a safe patient handling program. So what are the results of using safe patient handling? That's the key. What are the results? Well, one thing we're finding out is that our ICU patients are getting up sooner. You can imagine working in an ICU, trying to get somebody out of bed once or twice a day. If it takes 4 or 5 people and everybody's nervous, it's not going to happen very often. But if you have a really good piece of equipment and it only takes a couple of people, everybody feels safe, including the patient, it's going to happen more often. And that is truly what is occurring. So we're finding out that using safe patient handling equipment is better for the patient. They have fewer complications, better outcomes, and they're getting out sooner. The other thing is decreased patient injuries, and that's always good, but patients are not falling as often with this equipment. Another plus is that, of course, it's helping us move our bariatric patients. Patients are getting larger, and something has to change. So we are using it to move those patients. It's improving employee satisfaction. If you're not going home each day exhausted or with your sore neck and sore shoulders, you're going to like your job better. So that's another side benefit. What the institutions are finding out is that the equipment pays for itself in 1 to 2 years. So they're getting their money back and more. The reason I love it so much is that it is decreasing healthcare worker injury rates. And that's my passion. That's why I'm here, because I want all of you who are going into healthcare to have long, healthy, safe careers. It's such a tragedy when somebody sacrifices to become a healthcare worker, time and money and education, and then does a good job and wants to do a good job for their patients, and then gets injured themselves and can no longer work. But it happens all the time, and we just have to do something different. It is a paradigm shift. It takes all of us thinking differently. It takes the whole hospital or nursing home thinking and doing things differently. And that's a lot to ask. It does have to be integrated throughout the whole healthcare institution. Can't be just one little area that's involved. Really, the whole facility needs to be on board. It does take a lot of equipment and supplies. It does take organizing and educating people. So it takes time and resources. And for some people, it takes about 3 years to get fully integrated. It is a lot to ask, but it's not impossible. Back in the 80s, when I was out of school, I'd never seen a hand sanitizer or the Sharps container. They didn't exist. And when we found out about bloodborne pathogens, everything had to change. And boy, that took the hospital buying the hand sanitizers and the devices, training all of us. It took convincing for all of us, but our industry did it. Our industry changed. We needed to. And now nobody thinks twice. I remember being worried that if I put gloves on, my patient would be offended. And now everybody expects it. I remember the first time I used hand sanitizer. I remember squirted some on my palm. I looked at it and I laughed. So I think it's the same with safe patient handling. It's just going to take time. And someday, hopefully it'll be so ubiquitous, people won't even think twice about pulling the lift in the room to take care of the patient. Who uses safe patient handling devices? Any department can use it. It's most largely used in nursing, but the OR, the ER, diagnostic imaging departments, PT and OT, everybody can use it. And in our state, the VA is fully on board 100%. They do such a great job. Banner is Mayo has building a new tower, and every single patient room is going to have a ceiling lift. And then even our smaller hospitals, Verde Valley and Flagstaff Medical Center, like completely using the equipment. So it's out there, and I hope you guys get to use it. This is a duplicate slide, so I will move on. So we have two labs now. We have a small one on the Washington campus in the CH building, and we now have a brand new big one. It's so new I don't even have a picture of it on the 18th Street campus. We're very excited. And that's our logo, and it's called the Safe Patient Handling Lab because it's SA for safe and P for patient, H for handling, and E for education. That's all I have for this presentation. I hope that you move on to the much shorter presentation on biomechanics for safe patient handling labs. Thanks for hanging in there.